Hi, everyone. Uh, my name is Andriana, and I'm talent marketing specialist at Intellias. Glad that you have joined us today, and I hope that you are going to hear very useful information today, and that you all will be satisfied. While the rest of our participants are joining in, let's talk Intellias a little bit. So, Intellias is a technology enabler for the world's biggest companies. Interesting projects, international clients, and global representations. 8 development centers and more than 300 open vacancies. That is what Intellias is about. We create unique software solutions for more than 2 billion people in the world, and it is all with the help of 3,000 specialists on the board of Intellias. And no matter how many people work with us, we always adhere to the people first approach. So now I would like to discuss a little bit some technical issues. And first of all, I want to remind you that you have the opportunity to leave comments in the chat. So during the presentations, you can ask anything about Hibernate, and our speaker, Alexei, will answer the questions in the end of the presentations during the Q&A session. By the way, if you want to check vacancies in Intellias, we also attach a link to our webpage in the comments, and you can check our webpage as well. We also will be very great to have a feedback from you. So we will leave a feedback form in the comments as well. So you can leave your comments there as well. So that's all for now. Let's get it started. And I want to introduce our speaker, Alexei Bratanko, Senior Java Engineer at Intellias. Alexei, glad to see you, and the word is yours.
Okay, let's start. First, I want to say a special thanks for Intellias company, for my first lead, Igor Dmitriev, Alex Schwartz, and Igor Gerasimenko from EPAM company. All these people helped me to increase my professional skills in different periods of my life. Okay, and I want to clarify that this section is like a collection of tips that can make your life easy when you are working with Hibernate. Okay, and the first point, what do you usually do when you first encounter a serious Hibernate problems? Something like what I met in one of my projects in one of my previous company. When you are using equals in hash code, it's a long book annotation plus year plus related collections, and in the end you will get a Stack Overflow. The same when you are using data annotation, and your reaction will be something like this. But in new versions of IntelliJ IDEA, if you are using an IntelliJ IDEA, if you're trying to use an equals and hash code in your entity, you will get a tips of IntelliJ that if you will use this annotation, you will have some problems with your application. And the first topic which I want to talk about, it's a slow queries. I think it's the most common problem with any application which is work with database, and how we can detect and how we can avoid slow queries. The first, I think it's more not related to Hibernate. We can use a JProfiler. It's a special tool which can detect all queries which our application is sent to database, and it can show the summary time of these queries. Also, we can use a special property if we are when we are using a Hibernate. We can show all queries which is slower than some value. For example, here we will show all queries which is slower than 10 milliseconds, and it's a log which we see after this property will be enabled. And the second one, we can add a special property to show all SQL switches Hibernate generated, show comments, and format these SQLs. And this is like a log which we see after this property will be enabled. Also, we can enable a statement statistic. For example, we need it when we try to fix an n+1 problem, and we see how much trips Hibernate will done when connect to database. And it's a property if we are using a Hibernate without any frameworks, and if you're using a Hibernate example with Spring GPA, it will be a Spring GPA property. Hibernate generates statistics true. And also we can avoid and we can detect slow queries when we are using statistics on database level. It's a screenshot from one of my projects from EPAM company. It's not on NDI actually, and it was in MariaDB, and there we see what SQL query was executed on this database. And after we collected all this information, we can do some optimization works. For example, we can use an explain on database side to increase performance of our slow queries. And the second topic, it's complex updates. If you're trying to update something by using a Hibernate, and for example, we change only one field, a Hibernate will generate for us a complex query which updated all fields. It's we enable a statistic, and we see that we update only one field, but in query we updated all fields. And how we can avoid this? We can use an annotation dynamic update, and then after we add this annotation, Hibernate will generate a query, something like this. It will update only one field. And the second one we can use, if we are using a Spring Data GPA, we can use a query annotation with SQL on it. Then we can also, if you want to increase performance of our application, we can use some part of native JDBC. It's two classes, work and returning work. And this is an example. We have some method. In this method, we are using entity manager. And we pass as a parameter to this entity manager our class query user work, which we are creating, and this class implement returning work. Actually, we can implement two interfaces. It's a returning work and work. Returning work if you want to return something from query, and work if you're running some void query, for example, delete, and we do not want to return any values after that. Actually, it's an interface returning work with method execute. You can see that it's typed. You need to add some types when implementing this interface. And public interface work. If we are using it, if we do not return anything from our query. But we have one gap when using work or returning work. When we using these classes, we also do not use a persistence context, and or another word, we do not have a cache, first level cache and Hibernate. And the next topic is DTO and entity. Actually, the most developers which are using a Hibernate, they retrieve all information to entity and then remap these entity fields to DTO. For example, we can have an entity, for example, 100 fields, and it's a real situation. I had a situation like this in one project in Nepal company, and it was using only 2 fields from this 100, and we have a lot of our memory we are using to map the fields which we do not use, and we can write a query that can map our information to DTO, and we can do it. We have 2 solutions how to do it. Actually, we have more solutions, but in my career, I use only these 2. The first solution is we can use a query, and we are using a Sprint Data GPA, and we say that select user DTO and pass a param here, and in the end we receive a DTO object from this query, and here we can see what a query our Hibernate is generating. And also in this case, we see that we do not use first level cache persistence context. And the second solution, it's a new solution, result transformers, but result transformers in functional style. In Hibernate, this solution was added in version 6, and version 6, if I remember, it was released not so far time ago, maybe a half of year ago. And here we can use something like tuple and map tuple to our DTO. And the third solution, it's a deprecated solution. We can use special class result transformer, but its solution was deprecated from version 5.3, if I remember. And here we have something like a graphic. We can see that if we using an entity and if we using a DTO, and we see execution time in milliseconds if we using both of these types of information, and batch and ordering. We can enable a special setting when we're trying to insert something to database, or if we're trying to update something in database, we can do it in batch. But this setting will be not working effectively without ordering. For example, I think it's a classic example. For example, if we update the first user, then row, then user, then row, then batch will not be works in this case, and it will be works only with ordering. And here we can also see that if we enable an ordering settings, we will increase our performance, and our performance will be increased quickly. And N+1 problem. I think it's the most common question in interviews. What is the N+1 problem? N+1 problem occurs when you use a fetch type lazy, because fetch type lazy it's a default type in annotation, one-to-many or many-to-one for your entity associations. If you perform a query to select an entities and if you try to call any access methods of entities, lazy association, Hibernate will perform an additional queries toward lazy fetched objects. And it can be a problem because the first problem, it's a lazy initialization exception, which you receive when you close your session. And the second, it's a decrease in performance when for any related collection, Hibernate will be doing additional round trip to database. And how to fix it? The first, it's also classic solutions. It's a joint fetch, and here you can see what the query Hibernate is generating. The second, it's subselect, and also a query which Hibernate was generated. The third one, it's batch size. And also after we enabled a batch size, how many round trips we done to database, and also what query was generated. And I think the most common used solution is an entity graph. We can create an entity graph by using two. We can use a simple annotation, and here we use a parameter name and attribute nodes, and then pass this entity graph, not pass, just use this entity graph with an entity manager. And dirty checking. What is dirty checking? It's not like a problem. I think it's more an optimization for Hibernate, because Hibernate it's not just an ORM framework which can retrieve some information, which can map information from database to objects. It's also manage these objects, and it's manage. It can have different types of managed objects. The objects can have a state is detached, managed, and remove, new transient, and some another. And by default, Hibernate checks all managed entities properties. Every time an entity is loaded, Hibernate makes an additional copy of entity property values. At first time, every managed entity property is matched against the loading time snapshot value. And here we can see a formula, the number of managed entity and the number of properties of a given entity. And here we can see a sequence diagram, how it actually works. A persistent context session, different levels of Hibernate logic. And if you try to debug a Hibernate logic, we can see that after we retrieving some entity, Hibernate put it to our context, and it's something like a map. And when we're trying to debug, we see all this data which Hibernate was put it to this map. And here we can see this logic. It's a find dirty method. It's a method checker which check if our entity was changed or not. Here's this method. And when we are using dirty check, because dirty check is by default is enabled on Hibernate, we have one problem. For example, we retrieved 1,000 records. It's a complicated records. For example, it's a table which have a lot of fields, and we'll change only one field, only in one entity, and then try and save it to database. And Hibernate will check all records which we retrieving from database. And it's a complicated and expensive operation. And how to avoid it? We can use bytecode instrumentation. The first I heard about this solution from a lecture of my team lead Igor Dmitriev, and actually I don't use this solution. Never I do not use the solution. And here you can see what code Hibernate was generated after we used a bytecode instrumentation. The second one, I think the most common using it's a read-only hint. If we are using an entity manager, we just set a hint, query hints read-only. Or also common user solution, it's a transactional read-only. But if you are using Hibernate is in version less than 5.1, it will not be work. We just need to add a read-only property to true, and that's all. And a status session. It's also a solution which I heard from election of Igor Dmitriev, and when we are using a status session, duty check will not work also. And the last my topic, which I want to describe, it's a flash overflow. Let's imagine the situation that we have, for example, that we want to save 10,000 users to our database, and we're doing it in a cycle. And every time when we call in a persist method, the Hibernate will save its record to database, but it also store all those records in persistence context. And actually, if you do not need all those records, it will be stored in persistent context. And how to avoid it? After, for example, we can call a method flash and clear our context every 100 entities which were saved to our database. It's something like clear our memory. And the second, and one more point, that if we are using transactional with entity manager, or if we are using a transactional with traditional Spring Data GPA methods like save, when this method will close, when this method is closed, it will be committed automatically. And that's all actually. And a useful links, it's actually Hibernate official documentation. What Mikhalke, I think it's the most popular Hibernate evangelist, and also some lections about Hibernate, and the most popular books, it's Java Persistence API and Hibernate. And that's all actually. Questions?
Thank you, Alexei. I'll send you questions in a chat so you can answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's actually true, but I met this problem when I was like a junior developer, and it's right. We can add an equals and hash code a fields by which fields we will compute this equals and hash code.
Thank you. Guys, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat, and the speaker will answer them as soon as possible. The speaker was answering on the question about equal and hash code problem that was left a few minutes before in the chat. I will double the question in the comment section, so those who haven't seen it will see it now. Alexei, the next question is, what is the most effective way to resolve N+1 issue?
I think the most common way, it's the most common used way, it's an entity graph, but you can use any of these solutions to avoid this problem.
The next question is whether you can tell about the Hibernate inheritance and which ways is there to use it.
I think the Hibernate inheritance it's for another. It's the same for another topic because it's a very big and a very complicated problem. And I think the next section it's actually will be about the Hibernate inheritance. And actually, I thought about problem which the most common problem which I saw in my career the last 5 years.
Thank you. I see the question about the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, you can. You will be able to download it, but after the live stream. Guys, if you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments. We still have some time, so. Yeah, I see that there are no any questions. So, we have other question. What can be the reason for Hibernate to not be able to load and entitles field?
Sorry, I don't understand this question.
I'll send it in the chat.
Okay. I think yes. Actually, I think yes.
It was the question about the proxy, yes?
Actually, I don't understand this question.
So I'll ask the person that asked the question about the reason for Hibernate to not to be able to load entitles field. Please, can you repeat the question and give more specifics, please? So we can move to the next question when we are waiting for the person to add more information. The next participant asks, does it better to use Spring data instead native Hibernate using session?
I think the Spring data is data. It's something like a wrapper which a syntax sugar. Because with Spring data we can use Hibernate in more comfortable way. But we can use Hibernate by these traditional entity managers or by using this syntax sugar as this Spring data.
The next question is how to make the query with GPQL with 2 tables without relations before Hibernate 5.1.
I think in case like this, it's better do not use a Hibernate, because when we have situations when we need to use joins with different tables and it's a complicated joins, it's better to use native JDBC. It's for my opinion.
Thank you. We have the next question from another person. It is, which tools use for mapping DTO and why?
We can use when we need to map entity to DTO, we can use a simple result transformer, and a result transformer in a functional style. It's from Hibernate version 6, because now it's actually released. And also we can use query annotation when we are using Spring data. It's also a good solution, I think.
Thank you. We got another question. What type of app architecture is most suitable for Hibernate, and what is totally not?
I think Hibernate is a good technology when we create some prototype or MVP. But if we have a complicated project with a difficult domain model, for example, I was working in PAM, and we have monolith for 5.5 million lines of code. And we used the different technologies in different parts of this monolith. It was a JOQ, it was a Hibernate, and my buddies a lot of others. And when developers first met the problems related with Hibernate, they just remove the Hibernate and use all native JDBC or JOQ. And the answer will be, if we have not difficult domain model, we can use a Hibernate, because on the start we can increase our performance. If we have a difficult domain model with a difficult business logic and entities with which a lot of related collections, I think it's better do not use Hibernate in such cases.
Thank you. Alexei, let's go back to the question. Do you remember that one that we didn't have enough information to answer? So I'll repeat it. So the question was, what can be the reason for Hibernate not to be able to load entitles field? And the person added more information. The person says, entity field contains proxy instead of object. Maybe it will help you to understand the point of question.
If you're talking about fields, if you're talking about that fields, it's a related collections or some related objects, it's something like related tables. When we're talking about tables, it's actually true that we are loading not fields, we are loading a proxy. And if you're talking about, for example, collections, we are using the Hibernate using something like it's called persistence bags. It's like a proxy.
Thank you for the answer. If anyone wants to ask anything else, you can still leave your comments in the chat, and we will continue answering. Yeah, I don't see any more questions, so we can wait for 1 more minute, and if there will be no questions, we can finish our webinar for today. Yeah, just a small reminder, we will send the recording and presentation to you in a letter, so check your emails and don't forget to check your spam box. So I think that's all. Thank you, Alexei, for your presentation and for answering all the questions. It was really interesting and lots of new for everyone. So guys, if you want to leave any feedback, you will get the feedback form in the letter as well. Thank you for your participation and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.